He's like, "If you don't get help, I'm gonna tell your family how bad you are." And there's something felt really shameful about that because I'd been able to, I think, hide it, and even though they knew I drank a lot, and even though, they kinda say, "We don't wanna see it, so don't drink that way around us," so I would wait till I
Yeah.
left and wait till I got in the car, and so something about that felt shameful, and so a lot of people say, like, that's a kinda high bottom, and I was like, "Well, it was bad enough for me."
Hi, here we go. Round two. Me and you.
Round 2,
Okay.
me and you.
I need to just tell everyone who's listening, I need to tell them the story of our first episode together. So, even what you are hearing is not our first show together. Hillary and I
It's not our
recorded.
first rodeo.
This is not our first rodeo. And P.S., she is a new friend of mine. So this was really uncomfortable and awkward for me, but I'm sharing this as a reminder to women that it's okay to do things and mess up and fuck up and start over again and say, hey, can you help me out here? So Hillary was my very first guest on the show, and I had no clue what I was doing. And P.S., still have no clue what I was doing. And I was so excited. We had this great conversation and it went so well. And I was like, okay, she's my new best friend. And I get off and I listen to the recording, and you guys, my microphone was not on. I have like no audio whatsoever. So it was just Hillary talking. And then I'm like, hello and welcome to With It. And I sent it to my producers. I was like, can you help me with this? And they're like, Katie, this is really, really bad. So I totally screwed up, and it was mortifying for like so many reasons. But I think it was just such a good reminder of like, I think it can be really scary for women to start projects, especially later in life, and feel like you have to know how to do it all and feel like you have to, you know, especially for so many of us who are type A overachievers who, for the most part, have done things successfully to start over and just have massive mistakes in the beginning and not want to quit. Like after I listened to our episode, I was like, that's it. I quit. The show's over. That's it. One and
One and
done.
done. But I
One
can't
and
even air
done.
it because I can't
But I
hear
can't
anything.
even air it. Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm not doing this podcast. And you were so sweet. And JP's like, just tell her you need to re-record it. I'm like, I'm so embarrassed. She was so sweet to me. And of course, you were nothing but gracious and kind and so lovely, which is, of course, why I adore you. And I think also just a reminder too that there are women out there who like will keep supporting you no matter what. So a huge thank you to you. And just so happy we're doing this again. And this time I do have my mic on and I am recording it properly. So we should be good to go.
Well, I was so proud of you for asking for what you need too, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's what
that's
it showed me.
difficult.
Like,
Yeah,
right? Because
that's
I
not
think as
easy for
women,
me.
no, it's not, to say, "I made a mistake," and I looked at it and I was like, "Control the things we can control." Like, I'm sure at one point, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
asking for grace and it's asking for what we need, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, of course. Of course I'll." It wasn't even a, but you're right. It's like when we coming to the right room, you surround yourself with women that, like, want to uplift and support and love you, for who you are, not for the perfect version that we want people to think we are, like, that's where we win. Yeah.
Exactly. But man, as a woman at this stage in my life, it's still really hard to ask for help and to say, I messed up. Can you fix this for me? Can you help me? It was a good reminder that I still have some work to do there. So,
I'm proud of
anyway,
you.
I'm so happy you're being here. I wanted to have you on the show for so many reasons. First and foremost, you are such an icon in like the sports and the swimming world and like just an incredible athlete and in your own right. But then on top of it, you have this beautiful story of overcoming more than just overcoming addiction, but overcoming shame and all of the feelings that come with addiction that so many women can relate to, whether they had an addiction to, whether it was alcohol or any type of vice in their life that was keeping them from living authentically. You really stepped into that and like went headfirst into all of the feelings and emotions and showed up like authentically and shame free, which is really, really difficult. And now you're empowering other women to do the same, which is incredible. So, for those who are not your best friend like me, can you start at the beginning and tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about your background, maybe even some like the early swimming days, like how you got into it and
Yeah.
how you got here. I mean, I know it's a long story, so we don't need to do you start wherever you want to start.
And you and I can talk for days, and so I'll try to keep it pretty short or shortish. Yeah, so thank you for having me on. I was so honored and am honored to be one of your first guests on the show because I adore you too. It's one of those just instant bonds. As soon as I as soon as we talked, I'm like, oh, yes, okay, I've known you forever. You're like the soul sister. And um, so yeah, I mean, I grew up in a little town in Maryland outside of Baltimore, and I was curious and I was smart and I was a knowledge seeker from the beginning. And my parents, just put us in a community pool when we were little. I'm the oldest of 3. I have a sister 2 years younger and a brother that's 7 years younger, and, um, when I was 6 months old, my parents just dropped me in the pool. My dad was in the water, my mom dropped me in, and I guess that was, kinda how you taught and the kids
Yeah,
fluttered
yeah.
up to the surface, and, they put us in swimming lessons for to be water safe, and then we just joined the summer swim league, the summer swim team club pool, and I loved it. I just love the water, and now I learn, and I think you're into the astrology too. I'm a Pisces sun,
Yes,
Cancer moon, Scorpio rising, so I'm all the water. So water is like
yes.
my safe space, whether it's a shower or the ocean or the pool. Like it's just did not know that at 7, but I just loved it and I took to it and I was good. I had a natural ability and I started swimming. And at the end of the year, we have these things called trophy meets where you swim against all the clubs. So otherwise, it's just a one club against one club for the dual meets. And then at the end, there's this big trophy meet where you swim against all the kids. And I got 3rd place. And I went to my mom and I was like, I want the big one. Like, I want the big trophy. Just 3rd place, a little 3rd place. And she said, well, the kids that swim for the big trophies are kids that swim year round, which means it's not just during the summer, it's during the winter indoors and it's a bigger commitment. And so I said, great. I'm like, let's do that. So my parents were always very accommodating of anything that we wanted to do or try. And so they put me in winter swimming and I started swimming year round and I got the big trophy and I love the competition and I love the camaraderie and I love the kids. And I was really driven. I was also a straight A student at the time through 7th grade. I got straight A's. I still remember my first B, and I can see the teacher, and I'm blanking on his name, but it was in social studies. And I still remember this. Like, I put America, and I put USA instead of America on a continents quiz. And I had to argue, and I was like, "It's the same." He's like, "It's not the same." I'm like, "It is the same." And it was like my first um, mistake. And so I like remember this, but um, and so my parents at that point got me a boundary exception. So they put me in a different school so I could be closer to our club team, that was in Baltimore. We were an hour away. My dad would get up at 3:45. We'd leave at 3:45 to
Oh my
drive
gosh.
an hour to the pool. I'd swim from 5 to 7. The boundary exception was from my mom's school. She would drop my brother and sister off at daycare, would go to school. I would go like, I mean, I don't know how they worked it.
Yeah.
And then after that, my brother and my sister followed, into the
Okay.
swimming pool. But I loved it from the beginning, and it gave me a sense of accomplishment and achievement, and I felt, amazing. And my sister was better than I was. So she was 3rd in the world. I was the fastest swimmer in my age group at age 11 and 12, national age group records. I was, tracking times with Janet Evans, who was the distance swimmer and the Olympian. She went to Stanford. Like, I wanted to be her.
Wait, can we just then acknowledge how young that is to be that good and that have that much success, like, at 11 and 12?
Isn't it funny? Because when you say that, I want to be like, yeah, but it was just for my age group,
That's
right? Which is where I go with that.
so, like yeah, I know, right? To be
I'm
like,
like,
to
it's not
minimize
that
it.
good.
So much pressure at such a young
Thank
age.
you.
Okay, keep telling us more.
But I loved it, right? It was just a natural thing, and then,
Yeah.
I made nationals. I was, went to junior nationals in Boca Raton, Florida when I was 11,
Oh my gosh.
and I loved it, and my sister started swimming, and she was w much way better than I was. She was 3rd in the world at 14. She made the national team, which means she was the top 2 in the country for all of the ages, and so she went to Paris, and, um, she was a phenomenal swimmer, and then, my brother Michael passed us all and was the greatest swimmer of all time, um, but it just kind of ran in our family, and we loved it, and when my sister started to beat me, there's no blame, but that was hard because I was like, "Well, I'm the oldest, I'm supposed to be," but my sister was, like, dedicated, and she gave up homecoming and football games and lacrosse games, and I really wanted to be social because I wanted to be a part of, and I was driven for community and connection, and I couldn't find it, and so at 14, I think looking back, I think it was depression, and I went and I was like, I think I'm suffering. I didn't say suffering. I was like, I think I'm I don't know what's going on. I'm just really sad. I think I wanna go to therapy, right? And therapy 30 years ago wasn't a thing,
Yeah, not the
right?
same, not the
It's not the
same,
same,
yeah.
and so I remember saying, I'm like, "I think I wanna go." My parents were like, it's a phase, you're a teenager, you'll grow out of it."
Okay, can
And
we pause here for a second and acknowledge it? So at 14, you knew something fell off. Because I think so many women who are listening who have kids at this age, and it can be really easy to think at 14, 13, 15, to think that these emotions are just like we don't necessarily validate them all the time. Like, oh, it's normal, it's pressure. They're just you have to get used to middle school or high school. But at 14, like you really knew like this feeling inside of me
I felt sad all the
feels
time.
yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
And I didn't have language for it
Yeah.
because therapy wasn't a thing. I just knew I felt really sad, and I
Yeah.
felt kind of disconnected, even more disconnected than I had felt, and, I started carving in my arm. I started taking safety pins and kinda carving in my arm and making because I wanted attention, like, I wanted to be seen, and I couldn't, and at the time, my parents started their divorce. They got divorced when I was 15. Um, I started drinking at 14, and it was the tool I used to escape, and it worked, right? Like, I could anesthetize those voices in my head of those, all the self-doubt or, my sister was beating me, my grades were slipping. I went from AP English, which is the top English, down to remedial English, and, um, all of these consequences were happening, and I didn't know what to do, and I don't know if my parents knew what to do, not because they're great parents, but, you know, I and I just started to struggle with them. And so when I found alcohol, I became really defiant and I became really I dug in and I was angry and um it found something that worked, right? And we grew up in Baltimore and so we grew up with lacrosse and so I'd hang out with like lacrosse players and the girls and I would go and we'd stand outside of a liquor store and we'd play the Hey Mister game, which looked like hey mister, for the college guys, hey, we have $20. Can you buy us a bottle of $3 Boone's Farm? We'd split that. They get to keep the money. We basically paid for their beer. And
Yeah.
it was, what we did. And we took, my parents didn't have liquor in their home. So we found it at a friend's parents' home and we take his vodka and put water back in the water bottle and drink it. And um, you can always find a way,
Yeah.
got creative
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
And that was 15-year, that was the start of my 15-year drinking career.
Did you know at 15 when you were buying the Boone's Farms, did you know in your mind, is any part of you like, "Oh, this is a problem," or there's something bigger here?
No, I thought it was cool.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
thought it's what you did, right? Like, kind
yeah,
of the against the grain, I was cool, like, I was because I was really good at swimming, and I was really good at school, and I had all of these successes, and I was a high achiever, and I couldn't figure out how to get back there, and so if I couldn't figure out how to get back there, I figured I would just say "F it," and figure out how to be good at something else, or just kind of ignore that part, right? And I think the same thing comes up, and we'll get to this too, but, like, when we're drinking, when these consequences start to come up, you can make the choice to change, right? You kinda come to the fork in the road, or you can stick with the shame, bury the shame, and say, "I'm gonna keep going and pretend this doesn't exist." And that was kind of the beginning of that, "I'm gonna pretend this doesn't exist, and I'm just gonna keep going." And so I became this ostrich, sticking my head in the sand and, like,
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
maybe I knew it wasn't right. I mean, my parents weren't modeling drinking, but, um it was the tool that I had.
It was the tool that you had, and you were so young, and at such a young age, and not in any way that we can I think it's sometimes hard, like, we wanna make sense of things, so we're like, "Oh, it's because of the pressure that this happened," and we want to make sense of the story and say A and B happened, and so C happened, and it's not always as black and white and as clear cut as that, we know, and I will say it does feel like just hearing you share your story, so much of it is, I think, relatable for so many women, not necessarily at the depression at 14 or drinking at 15, but this feeling of I need to be on and perform and to be this person. And you get validation for being this person and it becomes your identity. And here you are, this incredibly successful, bright young woman who is doing it all great. And as soon as that begins to change, of course, at such a young age, you don't have the foundation to know necessarily who you are, but it becomes like, then who am I if I if I'm not the best swimmer? Who am I if I'm not this straight A student? And that is happens to us when we're 14. It happens to us when we're in our 40s. Like that story of like, who am I? Where do I fit in the world if I'm not the best, or if I'm not successful, if I'm not one of these accolades? It's really hard to find ourselves.
Yeah, and something else you said too about that external validation, like, sports is so great, but I didn't have any inner validation, right? Like, I didn't think I was, like, a good person or a kind person, like, none of those things were modeled. It was all about achieving, right? And beating my time and getting, being better. And you're right. And from that early age, I think is when I started to dissociate. It's like I'm not going to acknowledge the feelings that are going on because if I look good on the outside and everybody can say, oh, she looks like she has it together or she has clean clothes on, or whatever it is, that she must be fine. And so I allowed that burning, like that inner burning alive feeling to go unnoticed because I looked okay on the outside, and so that idea of the mask, right? Like, as long as I present well, it doesn't really matter what's going on the inside, and that started.
Oh, yes. I can relate so much to that. It's like that insight, just like, don't let anybody see. Like, can I fool people? Can we dive into a little bit further into then your drinking, your addiction? Like when did you first start recognizing it was a problem? When was the first like, oh, this is something needs to change?
I mean, the change didn't you didn't even think about making a change until I was about 25, and so because I feel like society also tells you it's what you do, right? Like, these are the years that you do experiment, and it's okay, and but for someone that has and I believe that alcoholism, so substance use disorder is an addiction. I believe it's a gene. I believe it's genetic. I think it's in our DNA, and so, for me, that's not a safe space to be, to think like, "This is just exploration, and one day I'm gonna grow out of it," because that wasn't talked about in any way in culture and society and my family and education, like, none of that was addressed, and so I just thought I was being a kid. I just thought I was being a college student, and because, I had got a scholarship to swim, I swam Division 1, like, I had school records, I wasn't failing, I wasn't doing great, like, I had the things that told me I was okay also, like, I'm just getting by, right? So getting by was okay, um, and so, in college, I became a blackout drinker, which means, every time I put alcohol in my body, my brain would shut down, and what I recently learned, I didn't know this, Greg was actually telling me, that you black out because the part of your brain that converts short-term memories to long-term memories, like, stops working, it's like a protection mechanism, and so you it shuts down, and so you can't remember, and I was like, "Huh, I'm so
Yep.
sorry, brain," like, "Sorry,
Yes,
bro."
yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and and so I became a blackout drinker, and again, like, it was college, and so you could always find someone that wanted to drink with me, whether it was on the swim team, whether it was a friend in class, whether it was the person I was dating, like, it didn't matter. So I would seek that out, on my swim team, we were big drinkers, and so there was always someone that would drink with me, and I thought that's what you did. I thought college was a really expensive party that I wasn't paying for, that I was swimming for.
Yeah, but I mean, you see all these kids around you who are also being successful and maintaining their grades to be on the swim team, and they're probably still making their times and doing things and drinking. And of course, that's what you think like, well, what's the problem here? It's working for everybody else. It should work for me. And, I think I totally agree with you. It's like the scary part about the way our society socializes and accepts drinking at such excess that you see everyone else doing it. And you're like, okay, this must be okay. This seems to be working for everybody else. Why isn't it working for me? Okay,
Yeah.
so
And what they were doing, right? Like, they're drinking and what I didn't realize was until much later is that their headaches, they're like, "Oh, I'm so hungover." They had 2 beers and they just had a headache,
yeah,
or they
yeah,
were just feeling a little off that day. Where when I have a hangover, I'm barely dragging myself out of bed. I'm,
yeah,
hand on my head in class, like,
yeah,
just barely getting through the day. At that time, I also didn't understand that hangovers are totally different for someone that has 2 beers versus someone that has 12.
yeah, 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 yeah. So at what point did you start recognizing, okay, this feels different than everyone around me. This feels different, or this is no longer sustainable for me. What was the breaking point for you?
So in college, my college roommate said something to me. They're like, I started just, it's just just not me, right? Like an really unkind person, not doing things that I wasn't being a good friend, I wasn't being a good girlfriend, I wasn't being a I was a sick person, right? I almost said bad person, but I wasn't bad, I was really sick, and so I started, lying a lot, I started sneaking around, and I started, um, because I just wanted like, what it all came back to is I wanted connection, right? Connection and attention, right? And so what I've learned now is addiction is the opposite of connection, right? And so I was seeking it in ways that weren't sustainable. I was seeking it through the antithesis of what it really was, but I didn't know, and so after college, I went on and I continued to drink, and I lived in DC or lived outside of DC, and so I'd take this commuter train and I would you could drink on it, and I would drink coffee in and drink wine on the way out, and I always drank wine or martinis because they were acceptable and they were, fancy and they looked because if you drink those things, then you can't be an alcoholic or you can't have a problem with it, right? I was 25, 26, and all of my other friends had jobs. They were getting married, they were
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
having children, and I was not doing any of those things. I was kind of floating through life and I was like, I don't know really what I like and I don't know where I want to be and I don't know um and I would say things like, well, once I got married and once I have kids and once I do these things, then I'll be happy. Like then my life will start and then everything will be okay. Right. And so I was looking outside of myself to start controlling those things. And um, I would do things like buy cases of wine because I thought I would give them away for Christmas and then I'd end up drinking them all and then I didn't wanna throw them away because what if somebody came over I had this idea of a life that I wanted to live, right? I wanted to live this life that had a full liquor bar and had these big cases of wine and have people over and laugh, but every time I go to stock my liquor cabinet, I would drink it all on a weekend, or buy cases of wine to give to people or have on hand, and I would finish them, and so that wasn't a reality for me, and I was blacking out, I was ending up in really dangerous situations, I fell down an escalator in a blackout, and I don't even remember it, like, tumbled all the way down into a metro station in Washington, DC, um, and I would laugh them off. I'm like, "Oh, that's just what you do when you're younger." And then kind of 25, I was like, I'm not really young anymore. I'm kind of and then, I'd also found myself in relationships that weren't healthy or helpful or supportive, and because if I had somebody, right, the idea of connection, if I just had somebody there, um, that loved me as I was, it didn't matter if we were fighting all the time or we didn't talk or we didn't, see each other, whatever, but it was somebody, and so I was okay. And in the one relationship, he came from an alcoholic family and he said, "Yeah, I think you really have a problem." And I was like, "I don't know." Well, I don't, like, and I'd broken up with my last boyfriend because he told me he thought I had a problem and I'm like, "Okay, well, then you can go." We've been together for 3 years, and I was like, "Okay, well, I'm not giving that up for you, so
Yeah,
bye." And,
yeah.
in this relationship, you know, I started we've been dating for 3 months, and he was like, "We should see a couples therapist."
Uh-huh, yeah. Uh-huh.
We're dating 3 months, right? Like, this is what people do when they've been married 20 years and they're like,
Mhm.
need someone and so my friends were like, "What are you doing? Just break up."
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
but this therapist said to me, "Well, how much do you drink?" And I was like, not that much." And she's like, "Well, how much is not too much?" And I was like, "I don't know, a couple glasses." And she goes, "Well, how big are your glasses?" Right? And she was the first one that kinda called me out, and she's like, "Have you ever thought about going to a 12-step meeting?" And I was like, this is no 5, right? So women alcoholics, there aren't any, like, nobody's talking about this. I'm like, "You're insane. There's not a no." And so I ended up going to one, hated it, right? Because I was like it was so honest and so vulnerable, and people were laughing, and I was like, "How can you laugh and have fun without alcohol? And why are you up there talking about an abusive relationship? Like, you don't talk about these things. You keep those things buttoned up inside." Because that's also how I learned to cope and things, like, you just don't show that vulnerability, and so the idea of sharing everything was just and so I was like, I won't drink, but I'm never coming back." And so with another 3 months, I kinda hung on and I was miserable because I thought as soon as I just removed the alcohol, then my life would be perfect, right? And what I didn't realize was that there was a reason why I was drinking, and all of those reasons needed a little bit of attention.
Oh, yes, 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 yes.
So I did this in and out dance, right? 3 months, drink, 3 months, drink, 3 months, drink, until, um, I left this relationship and I moved in by myself for the first time, like, without a roommate or without a boyfriend or without anybody, without parents, and I was living by myself, Katie, 8 days. 8 days I lived by myself before I checked into rehab. I was I was getting kicked out of bars. I was doing cocaine. I'm like, "This is freedom. This is life." And so the relationship I just left, I guess I drunk that. Like, I think about what happened in that week. I'm like, seems like a lifetime. I mean, he's like, "If you don't get help, I'm gonna tell your family how bad you are." And there's
Uh-huh.
something felt really shameful about that because 'cause I'd been able to,
Yeah.
I think, hide it. And even though they knew I drank a lot, and even though, they kinda say, "We don't wanna see it, so don't drink that way around us," so I would wait till I
Yeah.
left and wait till I got in the car, and so something about that felt shameful, and so a lot of people say, like, that's a kinda high bottom, and I was like, "Well, it was bad enough for me," because I hear stories about like my friend Charlie Engle, who was living in his car addicted to crack and was getting shot at by, drug dealers. That's a different bottom than mine, but I was like, it felt like enough for me, and so I called this treatment place, and it was outpatient, and they said, "Can you, we can't take you today, but we can take you on Monday." It's Thursday, I think. It was a Thursday, and they're like, "Can you not drink this weekend?" I was like,
And did you
"Sure."
think did you believe that in your mind? Did you think like, "Oh, I
No.
really want" okay.
Oh,
Oh,
this was
oh,
my
okay.
last hurrah. I didn't even know it was
Uh-huh.
gonna work. I was just going to treatment so he didn't tell on me, is what I was
Yep,
thinking,
yep,
right?
yep, yep,
Basically.
yep. So you weren't really all in. You were like, "This is I'm just getting by here.
Not
I'm
yet.
faking it." Yeah, okay.
Not yet. I was kinda like, "Alright, whatever." And he's like, I'm like, "Inpatient is for people with real problems.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't have a real problem. Like, I just need a little break." And so, I went to a bar that night, my favorite bar, and I was drinking wine, doing coke up until 4. And I remember telling the bartenders, the deal I'm like, I'm going to treatment on Monday. I'm going to rehab on Monday, but I might be back here. So you might not see me again, but if you do, like, you know, making a joke of it, and so I ended up detoxing all weekend. It was painful, and it's the space of, I call it purgatory, because I couldn't get up to eat, I couldn't get up to shower, couldn't get up to get water, couldn't keep it down, couldn't get food. Uber Eats wasn't a thing, so I couldn't get more alcohol delivered, and I laid in bed and just was in purgatory. And, Monday I went to rehab, and
Wow.
it was what I needed. I'm it was what I needed, and that's the beauty of
Yeah.
recovery, is that everybody gets what they need, they find what they need, and there's so many ways to do it, and for me, I needed accountability. I needed to go in every single night after work, and they gave me Antabuse, which is a drug that if you have alcohol, you get really sick. It, like, blocks the sensors in your body. Um, and I was like, right, I'm a firstborn, I'm a rule follower, I am the good things that come with perfectionism.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
talked
yeah,
to a friend
yeah,
about
yeah.
this, like, the on time, and, like, I like to do things
Yes,
right, and, like,
yes.
and so I'd go back on Monday, and they're like, "How many meetings did you go to this weekend? How many recovery meetings?" And I was like, "2, 1 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday, and these are the ones, and this, and blah, blah, blah," um, because I needed that. And then they had this 3rd hour called feelings management, where we learned about, I was literally walking through life, Katie, with my shoulders at my ears and, like, my jaw clenched, like, just waiting for to scream at someone because I was so pent up. Um, and we learned to just relax the shoulders, and that I don't have to hold on so tight. And then a pivotal moment in treatment came about 2 weeks in. I was going through my day, I was, like, sleeping better, I was starting to lose a lot of weight, and I wasn't really big, but, like, all the sugar and the bloating, and, like, I was feeling better, my skin was looking better, my eyes were brighter, and I walked into treatment, and I don't know what's going on with me, and I'm crying, and I'm a crier anyway, but I'm crying in the corner, and you go around the room, and you ask everybody, like, "How's your day? What's, the challenge for today? What's coming up for you? How are you feeling?" Whatever. And they got to me, and I was like, "I'm fine. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good." And they're like, "Are you? You're Are you good?" And I'm like, and I didn't know what to do, right? And so I was like, "No, I'm not good. I'm sad, I'm angry, I don't know what's going on. I don't have words for what's happening right now, and I'm confused, and I just don't know." And they're like, "Congratulations. This is the first step. Welcome, yeah. You're only as sick as your secrets, and you can just share anything." And I was like, "What do you what? This is it? Oh, no." And that was the first step in just starting to open my mouth and share what was truly happening and going on, and there were other people. I'm like, I thought I was the worst person in the world because I would sneak drinks, and I sat in rehab and I was like, "Well, I used to sneak drinks," and everyone's like, "Me too. Me too. Me too." I was like, "Well, you did too?" They're like, "Yeah, we're addicts." "What?" Everyone. I was like, "Really?" But because I kept all those things buried in, I didn't realize other people were experiencing the same thing, right? And that goes back to the community connection. It's totally opposite from addiction.
Was that really when things turned for you, when you were like, "Okay, I'm in this for the long haul. I wanna commit
No,
to this." No.
no.
Even then, like, when you were starting to share your secrets, you're like, "Okay, I'm relating to this. This is who I am." It still felt too big, too scary. What was it?
So it was one
Too
day at a time.
overwhelming?
It
Okay.
was
Yeah.
like I couldn't think outside of the next hour, sometimes the
Yeah.
next minute, right? And I would
Yeah.
get cravings and I was like, this shouldn't be happening. I should be
Yeah.
perfect by now. I'm not drinking. Why am I getting these cravings? And I was
Yeah.
able to go to meetings and community and say these things like, okay, so I just had a craving and I'm I'm embarrassed by this and I shouldn't be. And everyone's like, you're 6 months sober. Of course, that's not abnormal. But, like, I had to hear those things, and so, even at 6 months, I think when I thought that it might stick, it's because that first year of my recovery, I did everything I was told, right? I did everything. I had a mentor, I had a sponsor, and I would call God bless her, I would call her and talk to her, for 45 minutes some nights, and I would just cry, and I would debate semantics, and "This girl asked for my phone number. I think she wants something from me, and I'm gonna get to the bottom of it." And she's like, maybe she's just being nice. Like, I was wound so tightly, and it wasn't until the first year and I got to my year and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've been doing this for 1 year. I've been showing up. I've become a more, um, honest person. I'm humble. I'm wait, but what does this mean now for tomorrow? Like, am I gonna do this for the rest of my life? I don't know. I don't know. It was too much responsibility." And so that was kind of the first time after I'd been, for a full year of, "Okay, this feels more permanent than just not drinking today." Even though it was a series of days that I'd stacked up like that, just one day at a time, but I think at 1 year was the first, and then I had a really tough emotional bottom at, like, 2.5 years.
What was the impetus for that? What happened there?
I stopped doing the things I needed to do for me. I
Oh,
mean,
uh-huh.
right, like, right? So I know exactly why. Like, I wasn't connecting with my community. I wasn't,
Yep. Yep.
seeking support from my support group. I wasn't doing those things because I got it, right? I'm like, "I got it.
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
good. I can do this on my own." And I sat in my mom's kitchen and I had my head in my hands and I'm like, "Is this it? Is this what life is? Like, I gave that up for this?" Like, and it was that purgatory place again because the idea of going back to drinking wasn't especially appealing, but I wasn't really excited about where I was either. And so that's when I ended up going to an ashram. I moved to a yoga ashram and started really diving into spirituality and meditation, and because that's what I'd always loved. Because I didn't know myself, right? I'd been spent so much time drinking for 15 years that I didn't know who I was and I didn't know what I liked, but I knew I always liked yoga. And so I said yes, and I went and I lived in an ashram, and it was this beautiful, beautiful experience into kind of tapping more into that intuition, inner voice, spirituality that I'd been missing for so long.
Okay, first of all, I mean, that's like my dream come true. I would move to an ashram right now if I could. But I could talk to you about that for hours, but I think the thing is there's so many things that you said here that whether or not you relate to your story of like addiction that women can relate to. And I mean, there's multiple different things I want to dive into, but one of the things that you talked about here was just this idea of like at year two, 2.5, like it was another almost like rock bottom mentally for you. And it's funny, I relate to that very much. Mine was around like 1.5 years where there's almost like an excitement around sobriety in the beginning of like, you think you're going to become this new version of yourself and you're giving up this thing. And, whether it was like you lost a little bit of the weight in the beginning or you're setting up new routines. And even though there's this feeling of like fear and can I do this, there was also this element of hope that goes along with it. And you feel almost like a resurgence of energy of like, I'm going to become this new person, even though it feels overwhelming and terrifying. And then I think you get to a point in sobriety, at least I did, and sounds like you did, where you really come face to face with yourself again. And you're like, okay, this is really it. The bad days are still sucky. The good days, are better. But life is really hard. And being a human and moving through this world is really hard. And there's so many messy emotions. And if you hadn't been someone, and I had not up until, recently who had really dealt with all of my emotions face to face and was honest with myself about them and like was honest with my word, with the things I spoke to friends or to family, like really lived in integrity with how my insides felt, with how I showed up on the outside world. That was really hard because I didn't realize I was going to have to I didn't think it was gonna feel so hard, and I think sometimes people can think, like, once you become sober, like, "Oh, isn't it amazing?" And while, yes, I think it is, it also is, like, only if you're showing up then and continuing to check in with yourself and showing up and doing these things, and I hate using the word, like, doing the work, but whatever that is for you, whether that's going to an ashram, doing meditation, checking in with friends, living authentically, whatever it may be for you, it's work every day, and that's exhausting.
And I think the easiest way to synthesize it is to say, like, when I was drinking, I was trying to change my emotion. I was trying to change the way I felt in every given moment. If I was happy, I wanted to be happier. If I was sad, I
Yeah.
wanted to be happy. If I was bored, I wanted to have excitement, right? But when I found emotional sobriety is when I learned to process my emotions, and what I mean by that is exactly what you're saying, is sitting with them, knowing they're gonna pass, that it is okay to feel sadness. It is okay to feel scared. It's okay to have anxiety because all those emotions, it's information that's trying to tell me something, that I'm not, living up to my capabilities, that maybe I'm slacking, or maybe I'm mad with someone because they're bumping up against my boundaries and I'm not
Yeah.
holding them firm enough, or I'm
Yes,
sad
yes.
because that's something that I really enjoy and love. Like, it's information that's, it's not meant to hurt us.
Yeah,
Emotions aren't meant to hurt us. And so if I can learn to process them and ride the wave like an ocean, that's
yeah.
going to come in and it's going to go out and it's going to flow and it's going to ebb,
Mm,
and then that's okay. Right. But I think we're told too, like, cultural thing and societal norms, like, don't show your emotion. You're supposed to be strong, especially mom, super mom. Don't be upset. Of course you can handle more. And it's like, rest is lazy and all these things. It's like, what do you need though? And yeah, yeah.
I love this. The idea of emotional sobriety, it really is a thing. Like you can physically become
Mm.
sober, but then, and I almost feel like that for some people, for some, not all, can be easier. Is the physical sobriety. Then it's like you're left with this basket of emotions that you're like, okay, now what do I do with this? And having to become emotionally sober, as you just said, is so much more difficult. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. It's something I'm still working with, this idea of, and I always talk about this a lot, is this idea of like self-compassion, of having compassion with myself for all of these different emotions, because it is one of those things. And, I teach and lead meditation a lot. And I want people, it's similar to this idea of sobriety, of like it changing you and you becoming someone different. I'm like, oh no, you're still the same person. I'm still going to yell at my kids or be impatient with them. I'm still going to take things out on JP that are totally not his fault. I still show up as this human person with all these imperfect parts. I don't even want to say they're imperfect. These beautiful, perfect parts that feel really uncomfortable out in the world. And that's who you are, and learning to like live with them and to hold center while you're feeling them and to like almost in a way like embrace them and welcome them all in with self-compassion is so difficult because we were told like, don't be mad, don't feel that way. Even I had an emotion, something came up with a friend recently and I was sharing with John Paul. He's like, oh, don't be mad at her. I'm like, no, I'm allowed to be mad. I had to catch myself. I'm like, I'm allowed to be mad. It's okay. But this idea of a like emotional sobriety, I think is so beautiful and that's so poignant. And that's exactly what so many women, I think, are the most afraid of when you think about this idea of letting go of a vice, whatever that vice may be, whether it's alcohol or, overeating or under eating, whatever it may be, working out. Yeah, we numb ourselves constantly and we're constantly checking out because life feels so fucking uncomfortable. And I think getting to the point where we can say, like, yeah, this is really uncomfortable and I'm super freaking scared and I'm overwhelmed with a lot of life. And that's okay because that's what being a human is. And just like full stop, like no need to fix it, no need to like heal every single thing in the world. Like just being like, yeah, it feels messy because it is. It's really hard. Being alive in this world is really hard. Sorry for my tangent there.
Like, I'm like, "Why are you sorry? That
I
was a
know. Why
beautiful
did I
tangent.
just
Don't apologize. Take up space, like, own it." Like,
thank you
yes,
for
like, I
listening to
wanna
my
hear
tangent?
I love yes. And those are the things, like, I wanna pass on to my child because I make mistakes still, like you were talking about. I think we talked about this before. Um, I got I had a moment where I was not taking care of myself, I was not meditating. It was a weekend, I was tired. Like, if I get tired, I don't meditate and I don't move my body.
Oh, it's a terrible combo.
It's a bad right, and it's right, and I look at it, and I'm like, for me, it's bad. It is not as
Yeah.
bad as other people, you know what I mean? People are like my partner's like, "Isn't that bad?" And I'm like, "For me, it's
Oh,
bad because I think it's because I don't like to feel that way, right? Like,
yes.
I don't wanna yell at my child, or I don't wanna be short,
Yes.
and I got so frustrated with him, and I was like, "Pardon my lang," and I looked at him, and I'm embarrassed to say this, right? But it's like the shame thing, and I was like, I'm gonna effing lose my S," making this friendly. I'm like and my child, he's 7, and he looked at me, and it was like a Sunday night. We're like, I'm trying to get ready for school and the backpack and getting all I'm a single mom, like, getting all this stuff together, and he looked at me and he goes, "I can't believe you just said that to me." My 7-year-old is very intuitive and sweet, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're right. I shouldn't say that to anybody, especially you. And I'm so sorry," right? But I didn't try to deny it. I didn't try to gaslight him. I didn't try to, and I owned it, right? Because we are messy humans. And I think if I can show him that it's okay to make mistakes, that I am not perfect, he's not perfect, and that's okay for him to make mistakes. And when I'm not perfect, if I own my mistakes and I can say, then it gives him a safe space to just show up as himself or your friends, right? Or anybody else. And it gives them that permission slip to be the messy human that we are and know that they're still loved in all iterations of who they are in any given moment, right? And that's I it's the it's the mask. It's like that societal mask that I think we wear that we want people to think that we're perfect. I'm like, "Not perfect."
I'm so glad that you shared that story because I also think, like, for mothers listening, there is so much pressure right now, especially if you are someone who's, trying to live somewhat consciously. There's this whole, like, I don't, whatever that means. But I think there is this idea of, excuse me, and I love this whole push of, I don't know if it's like positive parenting or gentle parenting and like whatever we're calling it now. And not in any way saying that it's not valid or there isn't reason for it, but I think it also puts this pressure on yourself that like you're never going to lose your cool and swear at your kids. And I think we're doing them a disservice. Because I'm
Yes.
like, of course they have to see it because then they also have to see the repair because they have to see this is what
Yes.
emotion looks like. Emotion does have outbursts. It has volcanic moments and then it has a beautiful moment of repair. Just like you look at like Mother Nature, not to be cheesy, but there's be this massive storm and then a lightning and then the flowers bloom because of the rain. I'm doing a terrible job explaining this, but I think that we do our children and the people around us a disservice when we try to keep it all like positive or gentle. Cause I'm like, but that's not the human experience. And so while yes, I think it is really important to repair and say, I'm so sorry. And yes, and work on those. I'm not in any way saying we should go around screaming at our children. I think allowing ourselves as mothers to be human with our children is more important than being gentle with our children. I think them just seeing us as human. I think we want, at least I grew up in an era of like where I held my parents on a pedestal. I didn't see them really fight. I didn't know the struggles in marriage. I didn't know the struggles with finances. I didn't know the stress my mom was under. I didn't understand it. And as a woman, I was like, wait, no one told me this and I feel like I almost got fucked because then I was older in life and I'm like, wait, this is so much harder. What do you mean there's no happily ever after? I thought
It's
that's what
work.
happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think setting up, I know we're going on another tangent here about mothers, but I do think thank you for saying that about that moment you yelled at your son because I think it makes you human. And I feel like that's the best we can do for our kids is to show up really honestly and allow them to see all of those parts of ourselves. And I think it's beautiful because I do feel like sobriety allows us as mothers to show up a little clearer. And so when we have those outbursts, when we have those volcanic moments, if you will, we can really like get out of our own ego and apologize quickly and like, talk about it and explain it and explain to them like you're also allowed to have volcanic eruptions and this is what it looks like and here's how you say you're sorry. It actually gives them something to work with like, oh, so this is what I do with those feelings inside me. This is what I can do with anger or rage or frustration or shame or fear. It gives them something to do with it. But so thank you for sharing that story.
Thank you, and I think that's why women in community is so powerful, right? Because I can go and I can share with a community of women or another mom and say like, "I'm really embarrassed by this, but this happened," and they're like, "Oh, I did that this weekend too," or, "Oh, that happened last weekend with my child," and I look at this mother and I'm like, "But you're so calm and wonderful," and that's okay too. Like, we can have those moments of but I think there's also and I talked, um to another woman about this, and we were talking because I read a lot and I read, like how to be, conscious parent and the inner child development and all of this stuff. And so sometimes I become so paralyzed by the knowledge that I'm like, now I want to be perfect, right? Like, wait, I can't say this because then his inner child is going to feel the sense of lack. And and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go with my intuition. Like, what do you need in this moment? Okay, you know
Yes.
what? We're going to play the iPad together for 10 minutes because it seems like it's okay. Like, that's not going to ruin you for life if I let you play Minecraft, or if I but sometimes that can feel it's like paralysis by perfection can be but just having that just ease of it doesn't have to be perfect all the time, but we're doing the best
L
we can, and that's
100%.
different than what it was,
Yes, and
40
listen,
years
like
ago.
yes, and like ditto to everything you just said. I think that there's all these self-help books out there that are PS I've like devoured every single one of them and like I can't get my hands on enough. And I mean I only read nonfiction and I books like constantly falling over my nightstand. I listen to every single podcast under the sun. And I'm gonna tell you what, I do think at the end of the day, there is something that is about us going back into our own intuition and learning to trust our own selves that we've sort of looked to all the experts out there and every podcast out there and every book to do like parent this way, be in a relationship this way. This is how you move your body. This is what meditation should look like, blah, blah, whatever it may be. And I think we've lost our own ability to trust our own intuitive knowing and be like, actually, you already know, like Hillary, you already know how to mother your child the best. You already know how to take care of your body the best. And same thing for myself. Like I'm always having to remind myself, like, actually, you are your own expert. You are your own like teacher and it's okay to trust yourself. But I feel like as a society, we've almost gotten too into self-perfection and self-optimization and all of these other things. It's almost, the pendulum's almost swung a little too far. So I just want to like bring it back a little bit. Like it's actually okay to turn out some of that noise that you're seeing, whether it's online or in books or podcasts, and just trust yourself. Go back into that space of knowing. But speaking of which, it's just leading me. I didn't mean for this to lead there, but we're going there. You do this with so many of the women you work with, empowering them to trust their own intuition. Can we talk about so you are what now, like 15, 16 years sober, 17, and you run I'm going to call it a coaching business, platform for women to come home to themselves, for lack of a better word. Can we talk about that for a minute? How you got into that, how it's going? Like, what are you loving it? Just tell us everything.
I love it, I love it, and so, um, you know, I worked with a coach when I was navigating out of a challenging, toxic relationship, and, she was really helpful in helping me find my voice. I'd been kind of silenced and it was in a tough space. And so she helped me. And when I was younger, I wanted to be a therapist and I always wanted to help people, right? Like I wanted to volunteer with abused children and I wanted to give back to animals. Like I've just always had this nurturing side um and I was doing public relations and I was doing some photography and I liked it. And but after working with this coach, she had such a huge impact on my life. And then in 2022, my divorce was final. I moved uh, with my son into an apartment. Um, I didn't have a job. I was a stay-at-home mom when I left, and so I was doing it with some photography, and so I kind of launched a business. And then at the end of the year, my dad died. unexpectedly, and still gets me. My dad was like my safety, all
Yeah.
and so when my dad died, I I was 15 years sober. I just started sharing about my recovery at this time, and I remember
Yeah.
sitting on a hill outside of my apartment. My son was with his dad, and I was, like, looking at the sky. I'm like, "Are you shitting me? Like, what else what else? Like, I'm barely hanging on here. Like, I don't know what to do." And so, um, the past 3 months before that, I've just been sharing about my recovery. I've been doing some podcasts, and so I started to get this idea. I'm like, "Well, maybe I can transition this into really helping more people." Like, I wanna speak out because when I started speaking, I was like, "If I can help one woman feel less alone in her struggles," and that's all I wanted from doing the podcast, and so I signed up for a program, 6-month program to do a holistic coaching, and then I'd already had breathwork certification and yoga certification because I'm a knowledge seeker, and those things had really helped me. And then I went through another program, a nervous system regulation course, and so I started accumulating all this stuff, and I was like, and for me, the certification was important to have some guidance. And so I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to start working with women. Actually, I didn't know. And I was like, actually, I have all of these. I lost a parent. I went through a divorce. I'm sober 17 or 15 years at that point. Um, and as women, we go through transitions. And what I wanted to do, I use the word transition because transition means moving through it versus getting stuck in it. Like, challenges we get stuck, but transitions we move. And so, how are ways I can help women transition through these life challenges, right, in a way that feels impactful and purposeful? And what I realized in talking to so many people is that in all of these things, it's all the same. Whether you're trying to get sober, going through a divorce, it's we lose ourselves, we lose our voice, we lose our purpose, we lose our passion, we don't know who we are. We feel disconnected from that intuition and that inner voice because we've given so much to other people, right? Self sacrifice, lack of boundaries. I mean, all of these things are really present. And so, my partner who you've met briefly, I was struggling to find a name for it. Like, I really wanted to do one on one coaching with women in transition. And I'd been on a podcast and I was like, look, what I realized was that some people just aren't going to like me anymore. But that was really hard for me. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that I'm wrong or my voice is wrong. It's just that I'm in the wrong room. And so I need to find
Yes.
the right room or surrounded by people that support and love me for who I am and my voice is authentic and real. And he calls me and he's like, the right room. That's the name of it. It's the right room.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
long story, but so the right room, it's evolved and it's a platform of one-on-one coaching, group coaching, process groups. We're developing a couple other things in the next couple of months, like
Okay.
courses, because what I wanted to do was what I realized was I wanted to meet all women where they are. And some women really want that deep one-on-one, super
Yeah.
connected, high touch work. But some women don't have the budget or the funds to do that either. And so I didn't want anybody to feel excluded from any of the work. And so we've navigated and kind of created different ways to reach all women where they are. And so it's, yeah, I think when one woman finds her voice, it creates such a dynamic ripple effect and change in every space in her life, in the family and society and culture, in her job and the life of her children. I mean, and so I know, right, from pain comes purpose, and I know how lost I felt in all of those transitions. And so for me to be able to look at a woman and say, "No, I empathize with you and I completely understand and I can show you how to navigate through it. Like I've done this in more than one more than one transition, so I can show you too." And the thing is with finding your voice, like I've had women now speak up in board meetings and get a promotion. I've had women lose weight, not because they're trying to lose weight, but because they're tuning into their body and they're not
Yeah.
using
Yeah.
food anymore, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's those types of things that give you the confidence too, right? Like
Yeah.
that make you feel empowered. And that's last week I had 4 women use the word empowered for the first time. And I was like, yes,
Oh,
yes.
I
And they're
love
like,
this.
this is the first time in my life I felt empowered. One's
Yeah.
38, one's 54, and they're but it's like, yes. And it's a partnership and it's a guide and I'm not doing anything but showing you, like acting as a mirror to show you where all of your strength is inside of you. It's all you.
What an meaningful work you're doing, from your story from, 20 years ago where you were to now. It's gotta feel so incredible to just see how far you've come and like what a difference you're making in so many women's lives. We will link in the show notes for everyone listening, access to the right room and all of Hillary's information so you can find a way to work with her that feels approachable and right for you for what you need. Can you talk for a moment? Something you said that I think is so beautiful about this idea of like navigating through transitions. And I know so many women right now who are listening are in this like midpoint in life, whether they have kids going off to college or are starting a new business. So many women are in this transitional phase of their life. What is it after working with women and doing this now for a while? What is it that you see? Like, is there a common theme that are keeping women stuck in these transitions or that you're seeing as being the biggest roadblock?
Mhm. They think self-care is selfish, and they put other
Uh,
people before them all the
yeah.
time. And I think it's this pendulum, right? It's not all or nothing. We don't have to be fully self-sacrificing or fully super selfish. Like, there's a middle point, right? Where we can and so for I use an example of this one woman, she has 2 kids, and she's a, sole provider in her family, and she has to take the train to work in the morning, and she so what we did was create a schedule for her based on her needs where she can find 10 minutes for quiet meditation and 30 minutes a day for movement, right? And so we created this and drinking water, which sounds,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
she was
No,
and
it's real.
now yeah, she's like, "Hillary, I was able to set up boundaries with my husband, and I was able to tell him where I need him to step up, and I've lost 8 pounds in 6 weeks, and I've stopped grabbing for food, and I come in, teach tools for breath work." And so it's she's not sacrificing time with her children, it's 10 minutes. But we think it as this is all or nothing, myself included. There are some days when I'm like, "I only have 20 minutes, that's not good enough," and it's like 20 minutes is better than 0.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think this idea of like having to become someone new feels so overwhelming, and really we don't realize it's all these like small little shifts that we make every day that you make over and over again. And I was just actually sharing this. Sorry, not to go on this. I keep apologizing. I have just Helen. It's like my fourth time I've said I'm sorry to you. No more. I'm not sorry. JP is in town this week and he was helping and I felt a little bit guilty because I had like 15 minutes before I had to get in the shower. I'm like, no, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm not going to help him make his lunches. And not that it was that big of a deal, but just taking 15 minutes to clear my head and walk around, the block a few times set me up for such a different day. And I do think as women, you're exactly right. It's these we don't understand the power of like self-care, and it doesn't have to be these huge things. You're not going to overhaul your entire life, but these little moments can have such a ripple effect on every other aspect of your life.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
and it comes back to, I think, martyrism and self-sabotage too. Like, I don't deserve it. Like, I haven't earned it, right? Like, I haven't earned a nap, or I haven't earned because I still need to do X, Y, and Z for someone else. But it's like those 15 minutes that you give to yourself make you better.
I'm going to tell you what, I still feel guilty when I sit down on the couch. And as if it's like a Sunday afternoon and I sit on the couch for a half hour, I'm like, get like anxiety in my stomach. And I have to remind myself, like, it's okay. You're allowed to rest. Rest is not to be earned. It's so funny how this stuff is so ingrained in us. Like it really is. And it just keeps sneaking in. It's like, it's a constant daily check in.
Because there are things that need to be done. And if I just
Yeah.
get them all done, then I can rest. But that
Yeah,
list is
exactly.
never,
Never going to be done.
never finished.
Before I let you go,
Yeah.
You know, first of all, I love that you are so open about your story, and part of your story is leaving a relationship that didn't wasn't working for you. And here you are later in life. And I know I haven't personally met Greg, but you have found a partner to share this part of your life with. And it's really inspiring seeing a woman live really authentically sober and find someone who matches that at this stage in life. Can we talk about what it's been like finding love at this stage of life and start kind of starting over again, like trusting in
Yeah.
relationships again? Like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
this has to be a doozy and like so
Yeah.
surreal.
Yes. I mean, when my marriage ended, when I left, I was like, first I'm like, that's it. I'm gonna go find somebody else. I'm lonely. And then I recognized like I'd done enough work, right? I was 15 years sober. So I was like, okay, I know what this is. I'm looking to fill a hole. there's nothing good that's gonna come from anybody, right? And so kind of was like, "Nope, I still have a lot of work to do on me," and I did for 2 years. I was, um, a lot, and I remember standing in the kitchen of my best friend's house in North Carolina right as that was ending, and I was, like, crying. I'm like, this isn't what life's supposed to be like. I'm 43, I'm starting over again. I feel like it's never what I no never what I pictured, right? Like, I have a 4-year-old, I'm living in a two-bedroom apartment, like, all of my friends have these beautiful homes and vacation homes, and, like, I'm not serving my child. Like, this feels really lonely, like, I'm just gonna be forever for the rest of my life. And so, I took those 2 years, though, and just focused on me, and what I meant I did a lot of sleeping. Like, when I got out of that relationship, my nervous system was shot. So, I rested, but it was hard, right? But, like, I would sleep a lot, and I would work out, and I would start doing the things that were great for me. And so when I met Greg, um, we were friends for a long time. Like, we instantly
Okay, I didn't
clicked,
know that.
and
Okay.
yeah. So we instantly clicked when we met as friends. I mean, it was after my divorce. Like, I didn't know him while I was married, and so we were at a conference too. Like, I'd been, like, seeking a relationship,
Mhm.
and I'm like, "I don't wanna look for it. If it's meant to be, like, the universe is gonna
Yeah.
provide someone that's meant to be in my life." And so we met at a conference, and I was like, "You're amazing," and, like, and so we just developed this really strong friendship, and he was traveling a lot for work, and, um, we had another friend, Charlie, and the 3 of us would just talk all the time, and we had this great group, and we called ourselves the cool kids, and we're
Yeah. Yeah.
and it
Wait,
just
that's so funny. That's
yeah,
so
that's what
nerdy. Like, I would totally do something like that, like, so nerdy but cool. Like, we're the cool
we're
kids.
the cool kids. It's a cool kids chat, and we'd send each
I
other
love
funny
it.
Instagram memes, um, and so it just stayed like that for a really long time, and I felt really safe, and so we kind of just confided in each other as friends for a long time, and then we say launched a text. He launched a text to kinda test the water, and I was like, "Oh," not and it was really cute. Both of us were really worried about, um, ruining the friendship because we had such a great friendship, but, it's been over a year, and, we've done a lot of work independently and together too, because
Yeah.
I started, trying to self-sabotage this relationship because you look for
Mhm.
patterns,
Yeah.
um, and so we both have wonderful therapists.
It's great.
And the one thing I can say about Greg is, like, he's the only thing he wants to do is help me shine, right? And he is not interested in being better than me or outshining me or dimming my light or putting me down or, there's no hierarchy. He's a true and I never understood the word partner until I met him. And there's a difference in a relationship and a partner, and he's a partner in every sense of the word. And when I'm down, he's balances, and when I'm up, it's and it's better than anything I could have imagined. And it's work, but I think there's a choice between doing there's hard, right? There's hard, you can stay stuck and that can feel hard, or you can do the work and it's really hard, and we do a lot of that together, and it's wonderful. Yeah, uncomfortable conversations, hard conversations, like, you know
Ah, I'm such a sucker for love, but there's nothing better than seeing a dynamic relationship and I'm like, "Oh, he's 100% who he is and believes in himself, and is standing in his own power, and she is doing the
Yeah,
same, and it's such a compliment to each other." And what you said about partnership rings so true for me. I've been married to the same person for 17, almost 18 years. And we had a marriage for a long time that looked a certain way and it was very traditional. And it really wasn't until probably, I mean, got better before COVID, but it really was COVID that sort of changed everything in our marriage. And we have a true partnership now that's equitable in all the ways. And it's like he is standing in his own authority and doing his own, I hate using
yeah,
the word work, but like
yeah,
he's being accountable for his own shit and like taking care of himself and figuring out what he needs and using his voice. And I'm doing the same. And it feels drastically different. But I didn't know that that's what uh, a marriage could look like, but it really is. The word partnership is exactly it. It's a partner. It's someone, they're equal. It's an equal who's,
Yes, and you
I
create a
don't
safe
know.
space for each other
Yeah.
to show up
Yeah.
exactly how you are, and I can come to him
Yeah.
and have uncomfortable conversations or say, like, "This is how I'm feeling about this, can we" and he never looks at me and he's like, "That's stupid," or "How why would you even think that?" And I don't do the same for him, and that safety allows us to go deeper into anything, like any conversation where it feels maybe uncomfortable, where before, we both came from where they were relationships that were more judgmental or like, "Don't talk to me," or "Don't do that," or, "Be better," da da, and so now we're both it's mm,
It's amazing. What you have is really rare, and I think so many women want that, in their partnership, and they're like, "How do I get that?" And so that's a whole separate episode for another day, but thank you for giving so many of us faith of, like, what's possible in a relationship, especially when you're finding it later in life and, like, I don't know, really know what you want and aren't afraid to, like, ask for it and know that you deserve it. It's beautiful and inspiring, so thank you. Hilary, thank you so much for doing this times 2, times 2. I swear I'm not gonna ask you to do this thing. Well, I probably will again have you back on, but not for a little bit. I'm gonna give you a break. Um, Tell everyone where we can find you. I'll link you in the show notes, but tell everyone just listening if they're not looking at the show notes right now, like where can they find you? How can they work with you?
yeah, so we have hilaryphelps.com is the website with 1 L, Hilary, and then Instagram, Hilary Phelps with a little underscore.
Great.
Those are probably the 2 best places.
Great, great. And then we'll link your
Thank
podcast, The
you.
Right Room, too, in the show
Yeah.
notes. But Hilary, thank you for being here. You're such a joy. I adore
Thank you.
you.
I adore you. Thanks for having me.